Okay. Agile Live Ops. There's going to be a couple of puns in here. I apologize in advance for them. So my name is Derk. I'm CEO, co-founder of Paladin Studios. We're a company based in the Netherlands. We are enjoying a lovely jungle in our office, which is nice and green and open space. There's 4 teams developing games. We are a total of 50 people, growing very fast even today. And we work a lot with publishers. So these are some of the publishers we are working with or have worked with in the past. There's a couple more that are not yet disclosed, but they're coming soon. You may know us from a game called Stormbound, which is a tactical strategy board game, card game hybrid. Momonga Pinball Adventures, an old pinball game 5 years ago, and some may know it and love it. And Galaga Wars, which is the remake of the classic arcade hit from Bandai Namco. We also did Amazing Katamari Damacy with Bandai Namco, and My Tamagotchi Forever. There's a whole bunch more games that we created and stuff that we have cooking in the kitchen, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. Today I'm going to talk about Agile. Agile, yay. Agile is a whole bunch of stuff, and it's a very complicated set of philosophies and little tools and methodologies. There's a bunch of manifestos out there. It can all be a bit confusing. So what I'm going to try to do today in these 15 minutes that I have is basically give you a little bit of an overview, share some of the high-level principles with you. Hopefully that will get you sort of inspired and intrigued to search for more. And then there's a bunch of stuff that you can, of course, find on Google and everything, or ask me afterwards. So all these manifestos, I find them extremely complicated. I wrote my own manifesto. This is my manifesto for agile development. And I say that the goal is to bring value to customers as fast as possible for as long as possible. That's what it's all about. And the presentation, in this presentation, I'll break that down a little bit more. So, of course, bringing value to customers, we're going to need to figure out what they need. We're going to need to actually build that. But we need to do it as fast as possible. So there's, if we're in a live operations situation, we're going to have, bi-weekly or weekly updates, maybe some daily updates of tweaks of variables. So that needs to get in their hands as soon as possible. And then, of course, it's a really long journey. We could have these games out there for years on end, and that needs to be sustainable. So we need to do that as long as possible. All right, so first one, bring value to customers. So let's figure out what they actually need. And of course, value is not the same as price, but it usually means that if we provide something of value, then we can add a price tag to it. So that's the nice benefit of providing value. But the question then is, what do your customers value? Where do they put the emphasis, right? Why do they play your game? And of course, how can you then increase that value? How can you improve that experience? I was talking to one of my producers about this, and she said that she works with a golden triangle of data versus intuition, which is sort of the experience, the professional experience, and the feedback. So Cassie did Cassie's golden triangle of her product management philosophy. And of course, data is a critical component to it, but how are we going to use that data? And that's a very important question. And I want to take a little step back from data and look at the actual scientific method to uncover this. This is a bit of an overview of how we sort of do it. If you look at the scientific method, you have the research question, or in this case, our goals. Then you construct the hypothesis, you build the experiment, you do the experiment, and you draw a conclusion. That's it, right? And that's the basis of all science as we know it, from space to simple things like gravity, etc. And if we map that out, that process, if we map it out to the game development process, then you can sort of say, like, okay, we have this vision for the product. We want to create, something. We think that this might work, and that's the functional design, right? And the functional design probably uses data as the input, but also the experience and reviews, feedback. So there's a lot of things going into that. Then we build it. So that's the actual development work. And then, of course, we do the experiment in a live operation situation. That means that you push the build live, and you look at the responses from the players. Then we draw a conclusion, and we define the next steps. Was this a good thing, or should we roll it back? Can we double down on it if it works? So that's the scientific method in a nutshell. It's as easy as that. And I also, as a small independent studio, we're not going to make it any more complicated than that, because if we do, then we're going to burden ourselves with all kinds of stuff that's just not necessarily useful. Then, as fast as possible. We're not going to waste any time, not in the presentation and not in the development team. We have a bunch of agile methodologies. I'm going to highlight a handful here. The first one is Scrum. And Scrum basically is very short. It's basically an iterative development method where you work on fixed time-boxed sprints, and then at the end of each sprint, you have working software that you typically ship. Not always, but usually that's the case. In this case, a sprint says 30 days. I recommend a little bit shorter sprints and also faster releases, but this is where what it comes down to. The basic ingredients of Scrum are that you have a product backlog. This is basically the big roadmap, the big wish list of all the users, prioritized in importance. Then at the start of each sprint, let's say it's 2 weeks, then the team sits down together with the product owner and they basically plan the sprint. They pick the top things from the product backlog and they're going to say, hey, we can do this stuff in the 2 weeks that we have. Then you start the sprint, you have daily stand-ups to sync everybody, and at the end of the sprint, there should, in theory, be something that you can ship. Now, the nice thing about Scrum is that you have a steady rhythm of development that you can work with, especially in a live operations situation. So if you say, we're going to ship something every 2 weeks, that's a beautiful system to sort of manage that speed as well. Then we have Kanban. Kanban is a little bit like Scrum in the sense that you also have, for example, a backlog perhaps, and there's this review process, and you can actually mix it with Scrum. I'll come back to that in a moment. But Kanban basically means that you have a process. You define your process. At the bottom, there's step A, B, C, D, E, and then there's certain tasks that go into your funnel of the process. Then the team picks up these tasks, they work on it, and then when it's done, ready for the next step, they move that task to the next step. The nice thing about Kanban means signaling in Japanese, and it signals that a bottleneck occurs. The Kanban is actually structured in a way that every step in the process has a maximum number of tasks that you can allocate to it. So for example, there's in this sort of weirdly Googled image of a process, which is almost completely irrelevant, but there's a couple of columns there that are filled to the brim, and that means that that's a bottleneck. At that point, you have to signal like, okay guys, this is a bottleneck. Let's say QA, the last step in the process, QA, that's the bottleneck. We need to test everything. We need to get it tested. At that point, the bottleneck determines the speed of your development. So everything relies on the speed of getting the tasks through that QA process. And at that point, it might be very useful to actually allocate people from other parts, for example, a programmer, maybe temporarily to ease the bottleneck to solve the quality assurance issue. So it's a very nice way to optimize process flow. Then we have lean startup, which is not necessarily a management methodology, but more of a philosophy. This basically talks about MVPs, minimum viable products, getting it out there as fast as possible, building something, anything that sort of meets the requirements of your target audience, then getting it out into the market, testing it, and seeing what works. If that sounds familiar, it's typically what we do with soft launches. So the earlier, the better. That's the mantra of the lean startup. And then you basically measure and you start going through that loop of build, measure, learn, which is, again, it's basically the scientific method. I highly recommend to mix and match. So there's this concept called Scrumban, which is sort of a Kanban board with Scrum sprints, and you do retrospectives and reviews, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. But whatever you use, right? Whatever you use, a couple of principles that are just solid are focusing on the value for the customer, working in those small chunks. Don't bite off more than you can handle at one time. Shipping early, and keep talking, keep reflecting on the way you work, optimize those processes, and get better as you go. Then the third one is that we want to stay in business for as long as possible. And it's not just a financial thing, but it's also a sort of mental health thing. Anybody who's been involved in live operations knows that it's very stressful to be under continuous deadline in a live environment. A very good way to deal with that is DevOps. Some of the earlier speakers also talked about this. You want to have as much automation as possible to minimize human errors, to allow the team to sort of sit back, relax, just push the button, and the build goes live. That kind of stuff really helps with your sanity. You also want to have visibility, so dashboards and things like Slack messages are very useful for that. What we have, for example, is a server health dashboard that just shows us exactly what the server is doing. So the engineering guys, they basically use that, they put it up on a screen that's inside the studio within the team, put it up, and everybody can see what's happening. Some points are gameplay related, some points are server health related, but all of these metrics, they just show us at a glance like, okay, hey, we're doing good, we're fine. We also have the automated actions. For example, if we need to go into maintenance, we don't have to manually check boxes in the database or whatever. It's just a predefined script of actions that's going to be triggered whenever we push that button. Then when we end the maintenance, it's the same thing. And everybody's, players are notified, sessions are stopped, all these things are automatically occurring so that we don't have to think about it. Let me see, there's also a couple of tests on the code base. I won't go into that too much. And then we also have automated scripts to push between environments. So we have a pretty typical setup. Testing environment, there's also a development environment, which is local, testing, then staging, then production. And each of these environments has a rollback. So we can easily roll back the code. If we mess up somehow, then we can roll it back and sleep well. We also have a visibility dashboard of which environment is running which version. So this is a Git chart, basically shows us where we are in terms of the staging or server, the production environments. This helps a lot with QA because there's a lot of moving parts, as you can see in this slide, a lot of moving parts. So we need that health monitor to make sure that everything is just where we expect it to be, basically. By the way, one of the advantages, because this server chart is a little bit daunting, perhaps, well, for me it is at least, but one of the advantages is that you can have a lot of stuff on the server, so we can really manage the game on the server. So we can update the cards, we can update the gameplay without having to push for the client updates. So all the cards are just on the server, and it's really, really handy to have these dashboards in place. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to be quick about this. The typical team setup, we like to have everything in one team in the same location, multidisciplinary, typical Scrum team size, between, let's say, 6 and 10 people. Really rough outline is that we just need every discipline on the team. And last but definitely not least is that, in my opinion, your company culture is way more important than all the processes that you implement. So whatever methodology you use, whatever mix you're going to create for yourself, make sure you understand that that those core values of the company, the reason why you're in business in the first place, your core mission, and the things that you value as a team, as people, right? That you don't sacrifice it, because that's the point where the sustainability will be damaged. And the other part of that is more practical, because when shit really hits the fan, all that stands between you and chaos is your culture, right? When everything breaks down, then it's the people and the mindset of these people that matter the most. So just don't panic, slow and steady, wins the race. It's a marathon, right? Let's not rush things. Let's not, sacrifice too much. We need to celebrate those victories, keep talking. And the way I sort of approach that in terms of the organization is that I like to keep the teams as autonomous as possible, giving them very clear authority and, of course, also accountability that goes with it, and then making sure that I get out of the way, but that there's a lifeline. So there's, clear reporting structure, and reporting is not something that has to be a bad thing, right? It's not a written TPS reports that everybody has to fill in or anything. No, it's just a conversation on a weekly basis. Simple KPIs. And then we can provide guidance and support and also create internal service teams to support these development teams like QA, engineering, HR, marketing, that kind of stuff. That's what I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Derk. That was super. Yeah, we have some time for questions, so great. Yeah, feel free. Shoot. Here in the front. One second. We need to get a mic.
Is it on? Hi. You're talking about Scrum and Agile. Did you ever work in a waterfall method? And how do you compare the two?
So the question is, did we ever work with a waterfall method? And of course, we work with publishers a lot. So that means that we're sort of on semi-fixed contracts. So what we use is a sort of a mix. We have a roadmap. We outline the high-level points of what we're trying to achieve, but we keep negotiating and adjusting along the way. Scrum is never an excuse to not have a long-term plan, right? So we need to have that roadmap in place. Waterfall typically means that you sort of set months in advance and then it's carved in stone, and that's not how we work. No. But it's a mix between, you want to have that product vision for sure. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, here. Oh, we're good.
Thanks for the great talk. And I wanted to ask, what were the biggest challenges on your road to the place where you are now? Because I believe there had to be process of transition. So what did you do, or where were the challenges of changing people's mindset to the agile mode?
Yeah, so the question is what challenges did we come across to the place where we are now, and whether there were any issues with changing people's mindset for agile. I think from the start we were very agile, so that helps. But in that case, agile basically meant that we didn't have any structure at all, or very little. And we're now with 50 people, so that means that we need to sort of get into the habit of sort of formalizing process a little bit. I'm very cautious with that. I don't at all want to create a bureaucracy, but yeah, we're going to need to sort of set some rules, so to speak. But honestly, what works very well for us is that these teams are very autonomous. So that also means that they define their own way of working. So I don't care whether they use Scrum or Kanban or whatever, Bon, and then they can just define it themselves. Some teams use physical whiteboards, others use Jira, some use Trello. Doesn't matter. It's their thing. So they self-organize in that way. And I think that's a really good way to do it. You don't want to go top down like, hey, everybody now needs to use Jira all the time, always. That's not going to fly. Yeah.